Hey guys, today we're playing Castlevania 2 Belmont's Revenge on the Game Boy Color. This is a slightly colored version. This is on that Konami Collections Volume 4. There's also a black and white version on Game Boy. I figured this one be more aesthetically pleasing just because it looks better. As you can see, this is the only Castlevania that I know of that I'm pretty sure, a matter of fact, that you can select what castle you want to play as, like in Mega Man, but it really doesn't make a difference which order you choose. Just some are more difficult than others. You don't get like a special power or anything. So this game is the sequel to Castlevania The Adventure, and it improves on everything. This particular version doesn't have to speed up anything. This Castlevania runs decent. As always, the music's fantastic. That's one thing Castlevania The Adventure did get right. The graphics are a lot better. Playing the Crystal Castle, which is the easiest one. By difficulty, I'd say from easiest to hardest is a Crystal Castle, the Cloud Castle, the Rock Castle, and then the Plant Castle. And then just decide whether you just want to play the hard castle first or the easy ones. I usually like to play the easiest ones and work my way up. The levels are quite long on this. For the most part, beside Dracula and the boss on the Plant Castle, the bosses aren't too bad. The hearts don't restore your health like they do in Castlevania The Adventure. I always think the color scheme they use to recolor these games is weird. There's a lot of pinks. And I guess it'd be purple? I don't know. I'm colorblind. This color scheme does not seem gothic or Castlevania like at all, but that's okay because the overall game's fun. I played the shit out of this game. This was the first game beside Tetris I got from my Game Boy. Sorry, I had to pause there. Those enemies in this game are the only enemies that'll degrade your whip, unlike Castlevania The Adventure where all the enemies degrade your whip. Only those enemies that you get degrade your whip. If you get hit by one of those orbs they shoot out, then your whip will degrade. The Game Boy Castlevanias are the only ones I know of that have the rolling eyeballs. If you want to play a decent Castlevania The Adventure, definitely check out Castlevania The Rebirth on Wii. It reminds me of a Castlevania Bloodlines, like the music sounds just like a Sega Genesis chip. I think the graphics are a little bit more colorful, but that's about it. But it's almost like Castlevania Adventure by name, and that it has some of the enemies from the Game Boy Castlevania. It's hard as nails, but not nearly as hard as the Castlevania Adventure, and you can continue as much as you want. I need to get a few more pieces for my Wii, like a sensor bar and stuff like that, and hopefully I'll be able to show it to you at some point, assuming that the people in the storage unit didn't lie and it actually is temperature controlled. I'm hoping my systems weren't fried. I'm not so much worried about the cartridge based systems I had in there, because after I cleaned out the Game Boys I found they worked perfect. But I'm more worried about the systems that have more sensitive parts in them that basically run on any kind of optical disc. I have a lot of good memories with this game. I guess this game, when I got my Game Boy, I was around 8. I got it for my 8th birthday. so I guess that was around 1992, I believe. That was a good year for video games for me in general. I also got a my own Commodore 64. We had a Commodore 64 in the house, but my dad got me a Commodore 64 for Christmas. Our Santa got me a Commodore 64, my own one. I had quite a few Nintendo games. I had a Game Boy. And I used to play outside all the time. One of the best shows on television was brand new and airing constantly, which was Batman the Animated Series. This boss is ridiculously simple. All you gotta do is hit this crystal, let the cloud wait, and jump when the lightning strikes. Once you hear that noise, it's a good time to jump. Or when he opens that little orb thing. Just kind of move around after 2 or 3 hits on this thing. Whatever it's supposed to be. The hooded crystal guy. This Castlevania is way more balanced and fun, although Dracula in this game, at least for me, is hard as shit. I can't beat him. He doesn't have the typical attacks Dracula has in most Castlevanias. Either does the one on the Castlevania Adventure, but none of the Game Boys really have a typical Castlevania experience. Like, the Draculas in these games always like have some sort of orb that like rotate around him and stuff like that, instead of shooting fireballs out of his cape and then turning into some gigantic monster. We'll play the Cloud Castle and then call it a day. I started to talk about the timeline in the Castlevania Adventure video. I don't think I finished because I'm spacey like that. So basically this takes place sometime, depending on what you go by, either before Castlevania 3 or after. I think it takes place after, I'm not completely sure. But you play as Christopher. There's actually a comic book IDW published. I never read it. I hated the artwork in it, and if it's not canon, I don't want to know about it. And since it was made by an American company that didn't make the games, it definitely wasn't canon. What sucks is I heard that Konami lost all their like artwork and stuff like that in like a flood, I believe. Either a flood or a fire of some type. I don't want to get hit by those spikes. That's the one thing about this level I always have trouble judging, is when to jump or when not to get on those things. Each level really does have a catchy tune. It's really not really bad music in this game. The people that made this game are also generous enough to add a password system. They must have read the complaints about this game, because pretty much they fixed almost everything that was wrong about the Castlevania Adventure. Though I still think it's weird that they left those guys to be able to degrade your whip. The Game Boy games, and beside Castlevania The Rebirth, are the only Castlevania games I know that have that enemy. Even when the Castlevania games went to the Game Boy Advance. These never really felt like true Castlevania games because of that. But apparently Konami decided to leave it still part of their canon, but now that Lords of Shadow is out, the timeline really doesn't exist. But since they're only having 3 games related to that particular timeline for the Lords of Shadow. I'm curious what they're gonna do with the timeline. Are they gonna go back to the old timeline or start all over again? I would prefer it if they went back to the old timeline, or at least remake the games from the old timeline, because I don't know, I just think the old timeline's far more interesting than the Castlevania Lords of Shadow timeline. I do think the graphics and gameplay of Castlevania Lords of Shadow were really good, though. It just didn't feel like a Castlevania game to me. It felt more like a fantasy game, as in like kind of like a Lord of the Rings universe. I mean, all the Castlevania games are fantasy, but didn't have that horror element. You didn't fight much of the undead or mythological creatures and stuff like that. And the second game takes a very different approach of who you play as, but I won't spoil that for you. Definitely don't watch the trailer if you don't want to be spoiled and want to play the first game. I'd say don't watch anything, just play the first game, because the trailers kind of tell you the story of Lords of Shadow. Shit. That's usually not a problem. But it is today, because I'm talking. But the Lord of Shadows, I always say, isn't a bad game, it's just not a good Castlevania game. I was really excited about them too. But even though the stories aren't that great, I'm always interested in the Castlevania mythology. And one thing they never covered in Castlevania, the original timeline, is what happened before Arya's Sorrow, because apparently at some point during 1999, Dracula was permanently defeated and Castlevania got sealed in the moon. And that's kind of where Arya's Sorrow takes place, where somebody's trying to take over Dracula's place. But they never made a game of like the final battle. I would really like to see that, maybe with the graphics and gameplay of Castlevania Lords of Shadow, but with the aesthetics of the old Castlevania games and the characters from the older Castlevania games. This boss is pretty decently easy. Just when they pause, duck here. That's always a good spot to duck. I'm doing kind of shitty because I'm talking, but hopefully you're defeated. Yep. I like how the middle part has to blow up too. But yeah, I'd like them to finish that story, because I'm curious, and some people feel like they should leave that story alone because they want it to be left a mystery. But you know, I kind of want to know what happened before Arya's Sorrow. But I'm gonna stop here. This is the best Castlevania game on the Game Boy, in my opinion. Castlevania Legends is probably the second best one, but not even close to this one. This one is the best one. And then, unless you're a Castlevania completist that has to own every Castlevania game, don't even bother with Castlevania The Adventure. If you want to play the Castlevania Adventure storyline, stick with Castlevania The Adventure Rebirth on Wii. But anyway, guys, thank you for watching, and thank you guys for being patient and not terminating your subscriptions because I haven't added anything in a week. I meant to, just life's been really busy and hectic, a lot going on, and I just haven't had the chance to do anything. And honestly, even though I'm sure this commentary isn't mind-blowing, some of the commentary that I did on the videos that didn't turn out because of a video error or something were just straight up depressing. You probably didn't want to hear them anyway. But anyway, guys, thank you for watching, and take care, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye.